Well, g'day to folks, it's Admiral Revan speaking, hope you're doing well. And folks, it is with great privilege and distinct honor that we're going to be covering in a couple of dev blogs for you all today, as well as the lead up to what's happening in the next couple of months. So, as we are approaching here in mid-July, we have some great announcements for you all right now. So folks, patch 14.6 is coming down very soon as of next week. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I have to say that for what it's worth, it is actually some great news. Now, here's the dev blog that came out not too long ago, back in early June, and pretty much I was reading it thoroughly for a couple times, and I was actually quite impressed with the announcement they have made about regarding to the new branch of American destroyers. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that the game deserves a bit of an update. So there's some good news about the graphics updates and other things that are going on as well, so let's dive right into it. So, as you know, we love American warships. We especially love the American destroyers, and there's a new branch line of American destroyers consisting of the Tier 7 Hughes, the Tier 8 Osborne, the Tier 9 Christopher, and the Tier 10 Burrows. They'll be available for early access in 14.6. Now, each of these destroyers will consist, especially at Tier 8 and above, that they will powerful guns of 137mm guns caliber that can fire both HE and SAP shells. Now, the distinguishing feature of these destroyers is a unique smoke generator that can be toggled on and off at will, which is something a little bit different in World of Warships that we're not used to, but it feels like that Wargaming is basically experimenting with us and see how we feel with this sort of thing. I feel that this is a positive change, something new, unique, and different. That's what we're looking for. At the same time, however, like a submarine's dive capacity, the amount of smoke that can be used is limited, and thus encouraging strategic usage. So keep that in mind when you're using these destroyers, and it's actually not a bad thing once you get used to it. So it does come over with a bit of a minimal activation period and a short cooldown upon deactivation, so we have to make sure we're aware of it. So when you're strategizing this sort of thing and how to use your cooldowns, especially for these American destroyers, just remember that these are gunboat warships that are built with new tactical twist to the battlefield, and at the same time it does offer players like you and me a bit of dynamic change in terms of how we play and control on the battlefield with the warships that we have in possession. And then it also implies that it depends on our positioning and how we engage the enemy as well too. So that each of these two specific warships, the Burrows and the Christopher, will have a unique camo of each, which I have to say, you know, just by looking at it, it looks okay. And I mean, I actually like the Christopher camo a lot more than the actual Burrows, but you know, for what it's worth, it depends what suits your fancy. But here's something that I've been looking forward to, and this is something about the game graphics. Now, I had been talking about this on stream for about, I don't know, guess over 2 or 3 years in the past, I suppose, that I hope that the game will get a bit of a, you know, game graphics update. Now, I thought what it's worth, the game graphics in World of Warships, in my opinion, to this date, it feels like it's out of date in comparison to other games and franchises out there. But I have to say, for what it's worth, that a lot of people feel that the game should be, you know, redone with the new graphics engine, like for example, like Frostbite or Unreal Engine, for example. Well, okay, perhaps, but I mean, you know, from my perspective about this, it's actually good to see that the game is improving over a duration of time in the last few years. Now, I have to say that there's been an interesting, concept behind this, that the wargaming team have been focused on introducing new anti-aliasing technology with the image being reconstructed with a bit of a significant improvement on the quality without sacrificing any performance. So nowadays, I know that people do use like anything in the terms of NVIDIA GeForce range, that if you have a 1060 or 1080, back in those days, the game has been still runs quite well, but nowadays I have been hearing some random, bit of a pro and con with it all, saying that they're actually experiencing a little bit of a disappointment, but at the same time they see some sort of improvement as well too. But overall, generally speaking, that if you have a 30 series card for the NVIDIA GeForce range and above, you will actually experience more in going forward. But keep in mind though that the game is still playable with those who have the 10 series cards as well as the 20 series cards, and then I'm talking about NVIDIA. So I'm talking about like 2060, 2080, 1060, 1080, and so on and so forth. Now, the one thing that he highlighted, which is something that I was actually pretty curious about, was that they talked about like the smooth edges and reducing aliasing that rival the visual quality of SSAA 8 times technology. Now, SSAA technology is basically in talking about super sampling technology. So we're going to be diving that in a bit more detail for you. So sharper details and higher definition, preservation, define elements of ships and environments, as well as far less flickering on ships and structures without, sacrificing the performance of the game, and also the water reflections is also less flickering as well too. Improvement on the visual stability even during intense movement or dynamic lighting scenes, which is probably, I suppose, that if you think about it, maybe Operation Cherry Blossom, if you think about it, with all the changes from night to day, for example. But at the same time though, that they have minimized ghosting and visual artifacts, ensuring clean and crisp motion as well too, which is good to hear, good to see as well. In simple terms, visuals will look clearer, more stable, and less jagged, even in fast-paced action or complex lighting scenes. So that's actually a good summary of it all. So the good thing about this is that you can enable the TSS graphic settings under the anti-aliasing mode option, and the previous anti-aliasing options will remain available for lower end PCs, which is still great because like majority of us out there and around the world, we may not have the luxury of upgrading our PCs once every 12 months or once every 3 years. Some of us have a nice PC that has been around for 6 years, and to be honest and to be frank, that a PC or laptop that you had 6 years ago or more, at least close to 10 years ago, you still will be able to play World of Warships quite fluently. And to be fair, I mean, like, what is the real reason why we actually upgrade our workstations or gaming laptops or anything like that at home? Short version is, it's not about bragging rights. Some people say it is, but for streamers and also gamers, hardcore gamers, they want to keep up themselves with the latest technology, and it makes sense if you want to upgrade your machine every 2 years or 3 years or so. But games nowadays, to put it out there in plural context, games nowadays, that the hardware requirements is not exactly that high end anymore like it used to be. Intel and AMD have pretty much scored a stability in the gaming market of having both the processors, the RAM, and the motherboards supporting the latest technologies and architecture out there. But the graphics cards always have been the driven force behind of pushing into making things better and going forward. So the graphics cards nowadays for the 50 series cards as well as the Radeon cards, between them both, honestly, it's all about between 2K, 4K and above gaming. So if you're looking at supporting your graphics card for the high-end monitors and stuff like that, you're pretty much just pushing yourself for bragging rights right there. So for what it's worth, I mean, like, if you're looking in comparison to all these lovely, you know, lovely graphics here of the game itself, they have shown the difference between each one, and to be fair, I mean, like, it looks actually pretty good, fairly decent all around. So let's just go ahead and talk about in regarding to the classified documents for the operations with flagships. Now, let's just say that they have been talking about this for quite a fair while. Now, they've been talking about it since a couple months ago, and a lot of people are mixed about it, myself included. But having classified documents in Operation Flagships is actually not a bad thing, because it encourages you to actually learn whatever buffs or nerfs or something that actually helps you to protect your ship better or enhance more damage output or better protection or heals or whatever it is. So there's also an opportunity for you to learn how to use classified documents and implement them towards maybe clan battles, for example. Now, I know that not everyone is a fan of clan battles if classified documents was used in it, but I understand that when we did have random game modes in terms of the operations that we did have earlier this year, there was a bit of a mixed, you know, opinion about like how they were used. And honestly, for what it's worth, for what I've seen for operation side of things, I think it's actually not a bad thing. So they're talking about how they're going to use these so-called classified documents towards improving the current Torpedo Master Cruiser system they have introduced not too long ago. So there's a bit of an interesting from level 1 to level 5 to level 8 to level 11, as you can read this here down below. So it's actually not too bad what they're doing, and it actually, you'll notice that a few things here, like they have improved the torpedo damage as well as flooding damage, and also they talk about the defensive capabilities as well too. So pay attention to that. It's actually not too bad. Now, we did talk about, and this on stream a few times already, about the content reality system and the container barge improvements. Now, there's a lot of things to be discussed about that, but the short version is that, as you know, the pricing of the warships, the value of the warships for each resources like Research Bureau, coal, doubloons, and steel will change in the near future. So that's going to be something that you have to keep yourself up to date. So be made aware. So that's actually coming down real soon. Now, the content additions and changes. Now, there's new commanders out there. It's going to be pretty cool. So it's going to be the La Marina and also the Alexander Gromov, the Angela Luti, Utima, as well as Vittori Marino. New commanders. It's going to be pretty cool in the game, which is nice. And there's also some new patches for the in-game as well, and new flags for those who love collecting items. And at the same time, that there'll be two new ships that'll be coming into the game, which is the Kiba Pankov. Wow, Kiba Pankov. I have to say it's a bit of a tongue twist, but at the same time, we also have the Tempest Nera as well too, which is actually going to be very interesting. So the Kiba Pankov is basically based on the warship that Dmitry Kozarski, and as well as the Tempest Nera is based on the Rigiro the Loria. So that's actually pretty sweet all around. Now, I have to say that for what it's worth, if you already got those two warships that we just mentioned, it's actually pretty nice overall. So there's actually an Operation Dynamo premium container is also coming out, and also the Battle for Lady Gulf, the French Squadron container, and last but not least, the premium container version of the French Squadron group is actually going to be pretty good. So that's actually something that I have to say that, you know, for what it's worth, it's actually going to be very interesting for the lead up for patch 14.6. Now, I will be covering 14.7 very soon, and I have to say, for what it's worth, folks, it's actually a very interesting outcome on that one. So basically, that for what it's worth in patch 14.6, there is actually some good times for us all to play the American Destroyer line. Now, I have to say that there's also some interesting news and announcements being made about regarding to the German heavy cruisers, and they're going to be talking about that very soon. So Deutschland and Russia, the Niesbach, as well as Manterofa and Prince Adalbert. I do apologize, folks, for the mispronunciation of these warships. Am I learning to speak German? I guess. I have to say, I am keen to learn different languages, but I do apologize here and now that if I have butchered the names. So I do apologize right now. So in all seriousness though, that these new warships heavy cruisers is exciting because I like heavy cruisers in the game, and it's going to be interesting to see the manual controls of your secondary batteries implemented on these warships. And this feature will launch with the new German cruisers in the near future, so I'm looking forward to that. So this feature specifically will start at tier 8, which is the Niesbach. So anything from tier 8 and above, you basically see that feature. And it doesn't mean that it'll be solely a feature for this line in specific. It will be available for other lines as well too, by the sounds of it, from what I just read in the dev blog. So it will be quite beneficial in the long run. I can see this happening, so that's actually not a bad thing. But we have to remember that there's some important elements to understand behind this. To note, when controlling these secondary batteries, you will be able to swap between the main battery and secondary battery controls at will. And at the same time, it sounds like that you will have other types of armaments involved here, for example, between main gun, battery, and also torpedoes. And on top of it all is that you have to remember that when they are not manually controlled, they act the same like any other, you know, standalone ordinary secondary battery rotation in the game. However, the main guns will track the crosshair while you're operating a secondary battery as well too. So it's actually going to be pretty interesting going forward. When secondaries switching from the manual control of the secondaries, I suppose, and their characteristics may change compared to automatic mode. So it's for better for cruisers though, and this results is a small buff to the range of the secondary guns. So extra range on the secondaries is not a bad thing, especially when you're dealing with destroyers or those pesky submarines. And while this manual control is active, the good thing about it is that the secondary mounts that don't have an angle of fire on the crosshair will not automatically target or fire upon the enemy. So that's actually a good thing. So that's actually good to know. Any signals and skills that impact secondaries will continue to function as they currently do now in the game. So basically, if you are speccing your commander to have, you know, extra, you know, secondary range or whatever it is, same with your modules, that will pretty much not change. So keep that in mind. And here's the good thing about the German cruisers, that they do have a unique specialization for close quarter combat. And it sounds familiar because that we have had experiences of our own with in regarding to the German battleships like the Schlieffen, the Ruprecht, and also the other line as well with the Poison and the F. de Grossi and the Bismarck, for example, that if you spec your ships correctly in terms of secondaries and all the rest of it, you will actually have a very mean warship, and it actually has a very good outcome for all these unique abilities and stuff. So, for what it's worth, I mean, like from what we've seen so far, it is going to be a very unique outcome with all these ships that they're bringing out. Now, each of the new ships that are coming out in this game is actually going to be pretty unique and going forward for each of the German cruisers. So pay attention to each and every one of them and have a quick look on their schematics in terms of like their secondaries, gun firing range, as well as the survivability, and on top of it all, what like unique abilities that will have on each ship. So that is something for you to have a look into. But there's also coming out soon that there will be a Japanese cruiser called the Kishiro T10, which is actually gonna be a very interesting warship in the game. So for what it's worth, that this warship is going to be a very enjoyable one for the fan base out there, because people who love Japanese cruisers will always enjoy the HE shell characteristics and torpedoes. So for what it's worth, that it is very similar to the Zao, and it's actually good, just as strong as a Yoshino. So that this warship is a very good warship overall for the Mogami class. So this is definitely a very nice warship to play with a good mixture of hydroacoustic and also AA defense, and also Spider fighter aircraft is included. However, the Kishiro will have access to the exhaust smoke consumable, similar to what has been found in the Italian cruisers already as it is. So that's actually pretty nice. So it's actually a pretty good warship to check into. And also that super class warship for the Italians, the Affondatore is coming out soon in the near future. So this warship really definitely packs a punch. It is gonna be, I think it's gonna be the battleship that'll be after the Christopher Colombo. So that this warship, this super warship, is gonna be pretty damn good against the enemy as well. And it does play similar to the tier 10 counterparts already as it is, with a combination of large barrel guns, and at the same time that it has a combination of AP shells. And also one other thing that I did notice with this warship, that the Affondatore does not carry SAP war shells at all. So the Affondatore does not carry SAP shells at all. So that's actually very interesting. So the consumable aspect of the ship is going to be pretty cool, with exhaust smoke and a large radius and longer action time and faster cooldown as well too. So it's actually going to be pretty good overall, and you'll actually have a great time making good use of it. There are some downsides with it as well too, but it comes down to the accuracy as well as the relatively short range compared to the other warships that it has in that line. So there is a bit of that going on, and also that it means that you will have to require yourself, as you close in range with the enemy, that you will need to rely on her solar protection, on her armor. So just keep that in mind. So despite the size of it, in terms of handling, isn't the best, but the torpedoes will endeavor always be present as a threat to you. So keep that in mind when you're actually dealing with this warship and guiding with it. So it's actually pretty good. I mean, like, it has aircraft, airstrikes, attack. It doesn't have torps of its own, but it does have a decent artillery arc at a firing range of 19.3 kilometers. And you will see and notice that there's a bit of a difference between the HE and AP shells, and also the reload time here. So there's also some good news that these guns can rotate 180 degrees, which is not too bad. But also that there's also going to be some final looks over on the tier 10 warship, Soviet battleship called Sibar, as well as the French cruiser Admiral, which is actually going to be interesting going forward. And it looks like it's a hybrid warship. So in going forward, it's going to be interesting. So for what it's worth, folks, that it's going to be a very interesting patch update with this game, and also the new ships coming out as well. Tell me your thoughts on everything, folks, and leave some comments on down the video down below. I don't know about you, but this is actually very, very interesting to see and hear what is yet to come in this game. So fingers crossed, hopefully that we're going to have a good run with this one at patch 14.6. Until then, stay safe and take care, folks, and action stations.